Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank Podcast. We are coming to you virtually from Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, and today, beautiful downtown Regina, Saskatchewan, or somewhere around there. You'll learn more about that in a minute. Hey, listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this is the podcast for you. This is where street smarts and book smarts collide. I'm Dan Whedon, along with this week's co-host, Phil Simchich. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube. You might say we're ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, obviously from here, but we also are in Atlanta, Charleston, South Carolina, Central PA. We're all over the country now. Today, our guest is Rick Darrow, CEO of Liberty Bank in Paulsbo, Washington, and my bank. Welcome, Rick. Before we bring on Rick to get a state of community banking in the small business world, I got to bring on my pal, Phil Simchich. Phil, you might not even be in Regina right now, are you?
I'm close. I'm at Regina Beach, so we like to keep the names the same in case we get lost. We can either end up there or at home, so it's a pretty safe way to go.
Well, thanks for coming to us from, I think you're in a cabin somewhere on holidays. Thanks for coming. Hey, Phil, you might find this of interest. You and I like to not only exercise, but compete, right?
Very much so, on a regular basis.
Well, yesterday,
thanks to our Apple Watches.
Yesterday, I I literally threw myself for a loop. So I was working out on my own, as you know, Brett Clark, our former guest here. He's my fitness trainer, and he's been giving me work to do with these huge bands. And you're familiar with all the cool colored bands and all of that, right?
Bands are very dangerous. Colorful, just hides the danger.
Yeah, so I was using the black band, and the black band, as you know, is like the second. It's the penultimate thickness. It's pretty thick. And I had set it up to do this exercise that was kind of a decline fly, and I had set it up on my my boxing stand, which I'd seen Brett do, but I didn't do one thing that Brett did. He tied it off so that it wouldn't come off. So I had it back against this little block that actually comes off. So when I went to pull, the block came off, and the band came at me at about 179 miles per hour, like, when you snap the rubber band, and hit me across the chest, almost knocked me down. To make matters worse, because I was going to go get a haircut later, I didn't want to get my shirt messy. I was lifting without a shirt on. So the red mark across my chest was a reminder that I need to I need to be better prepared for the exercises I'm doing. Phyllis, anything like that ever happened to you?
Well, those bands are dangerous. When we were teenagers, we had those old steel springs with the wooden handles.
Yeah.
And so my brother and his friend decided how far they could stretch these springs. So there was one guy on each end of this, and my brother started to get worried and thought this wasn't a good idea and let go. And so the other guy ended up with a steel spring in the wood handle. Impact like you had, only a little lower into the center. So as you can imagine, for teenagers, that was quite the hilarity involved. So yeah, bands are dangerous.
Yeah, so make sure, everybody listening here thinking, what, I thought lifting weights was dangerous. Bands are dangerous. Yes, bands can be dangerous if you don't use them well. But Phil, what I was thinking as we have our guest Rick Darrow here is that the snapping back effect, it was swift, just like businesses should be bouncing back here as we are speaking in June of 2021, after the tumultuous last year and a half we've had. We're hoping, and we're seeing some businesses snapping back with the same vigor as that black band. Rick Darrow, welcome to the show. And I'm gonna lead off with this question. You are big on community banks. Liberty Bank is a great community bank. What is the state of community banks, and how are you in a position to help small businesses snap back and accelerate back into business?
Well, thanks, Dan. I appreciate that question. For us, it's interesting because if you look at the last 12 months and what we've experienced, community banks have really been the heroes in this picture, because businesses, as you talk about, have suffered during this period of time. And the fact that community banks have stepped up, they provided, I think, about 70% of the PPP loans that happened during this last year. So for us, what we've seen is we've been working with all of our borrowers during this period of time, is have many community banks, and we're seeing a lot of them coming out of it very strong. Particularly when you look at restaurants and the hospitality industry in general, there's been some great suffering because of the lockdown. But now, you're starting to see doors open up. Some of the masks are coming off. It's a very wonderful time in terms of the industry. And I see community banks thriving as we move forward. There was, at the very crux of the pandemic, banks were looked at as, the valuations fell dramatically. You saw, it being hit within the economy. There was this idea that we were going to have some real problems. But for the most part, at least in the community that we're serving right now, Dan, I'm very optimistic.
Rick, so the PPP loans injected a lot of cash into businesses, and that sustained them when cash flow became very tight. Supply chains are all messed up and things like that. So from your experience, I guess, what percentage of your clients before COVID in the business world would have had their cash flow knowledge and resources, like cash flow, stockpiled, compared to like how many of them were really surprised and hampered by COVID?
Well, there were quite a few that were impacted, Phil, and I think it was a learning opportunity to kind of take a look at how we run our businesses. One of the things that, the role that we play is we are a trusted advisor to our clients. And so for our particular clients, we work closely with them to kind of work through some of those issues. But not every business made it through this lockdown period, and even in our community. So we have worked closely with those. We played a huge role. If you look at the number of loans that we did during this, the PPP loans, we were number one in the state of Washington as a percentage of our bank. So, we contributed to the success in helping those around us. And it wouldn't have happened if we weren't connected with those businesses in our community. We're strictly a referral business. So the fact that we did the most in the state of Washington says a lot. And in fact, we looked at the percentage of what we did on a national basis. You have about 5,000 banks in the country. We were number 64 in terms of the percentages that we did there. I mean, I was quite proud of the work that we've done there. And you're right. I think for many business owners, this became a point of what can I do to protect myself? We saw as a result of that, a lot of the deposit inflows were great. We saw people, keeping and holding on to cash to protect themselves as they move forward. So the risk management side of it on the business side, we started to see.
So I will have to tell you, and I guess in full transparency, Liberty Bank is my bank, and I was a recipient of the PPP, and I know that part of that was I had the I don't know what I'm not sure what relationship banker. I had the relationship banker on my text. I knew who he was in advance. I didn't even have to go to the website or think. It was like I'm going to text Tony, hey, can we talk? As I heard horror stories from other clients who were dealing not necessarily with the community banks, but their larger brethren, and some of the hassles around the application process and all of that. I'd say mine was incredibly simple. it was like a 10-minute ordeal. And I say that in air quotes. I've got to believe that, as people are wondering, well, what is a community bank? This community bank concept is your people are working, side by side. Everybody knows each other's phone number or text and is able to talk about what Liberty Bank has done and is doing to be able to reach those lofty PPP numbers, both in the state and nationally.
Well, I would say, Dan, that it's built upon just the foundation of what you talked about. It's having a relationship. One of the things that we value for our community bank, and you hear the word community, is being involved with our community. That means with other people. That means getting to know other people. And so, for us, what's happened is what you saw with the PPP and the fact that we are involved. And you've seen that because we've been involved with Rotary clubs. We've been involved with helping the community through, for instance, grants for the FHLB to help, affordable housing, those kinds of things. But what happened, what differentiated us is, as you mentioned, it's a person-to-person relationship. It isn't, we're not talking about just using technology. And so in this instance, you really had that personal relationship that was formed and founded together with the technology to create kind of a high touch experience. PPP and the delivery of that with the SBA was very challenging because you had, the technology wasn't there. And so the hand holding, the ability to work directly with you, with others, I've heard so many stories where someone went to a larger institution, they entered their data into the box, it was rejected, and then they didn't hear back. And so in our case, there was a strong feedback loop in terms of, a loan officer or relationship manager, as you talked about, Dan, reaches out, knows that person. If they don't have the proper information, they're on the phone, they're emailing, they're doing whatever it takes to gather that information and get that loan processed. So there was a drive and determination. But I would also say that to get there, you have to have a back office, a framework that makes that work. And part of what we do in terms of building community within our own bank is one of the things I think I've mentioned to you in the past is every week that we start that week, we start off by talking about what did we do on the weekend. That sounds so simple. It sounds almost ridiculous. But in a certain way, what happens is over a couple of years, over 3 years, we get to know that person. We get to know who is ever sharing for 5 minutes in that group, who do they care about? They may have grandchildren that are, so important to them. They may have, they may be proud of themselves that they did some projects on the weekend. There's tons of different things that you find out. That kind of culture, that kind of connectivity is what we would want to see from our loan officers, from our relationship managers, as they go out into that community and get to know the business owners. And the business owners are usually very passionate about what they're doing, what they're working on. I mean, if someone's a painter, he knows everything there is to know about painting, and it's fascinating for the loan officer. It's fascinating for me to hear their stories, and then to be a participant and an advisor in that process is a wonderful place to be.
So Dan talked about the importance of his relationship with the bankers. And then in my experience, the business owners and entrepreneurs also have a relationship with their financial statements. They love their P&L. They love to see revenue grow, and more so than anything else. And sometimes profit doesn't get the attention it deserves. And in my experience, and I've been telling them for years to focus on the balance sheet because that's what bankers lend from. So Rick, can you explain why business owners should have a relationship with their balance sheet and pay attention to their balance sheet?
Well, I do come from the accounting side of things. So, it's interesting whenever we're involved in working with our businesses, the balance sheet and the income statement are where I go. But as you mentioned, cash flow is very important in terms of that process of following and understanding their cash flow can be critical. in what they have. So we do, in terms of managing their business assets, every business is a little bit different. And so, as you may know, when we look out and evaluate and look at businesses and help them, crafting that structure is different for every business. But understanding the basics of their cash flow and understanding that just collateral isn't going to do it, isn't going to just, you've got to have some liquidity, you've got to be able to have some reserves in order to move forward on certain things. And also, I think what's important for us as we work with business owners is to come up with new ideas about how they can look at it. We do pride ourselves on being a trusted advisor. And when they get into issues, when they look at the balance sheet and understand what they have or what they don't have, what can they do to complement and add to that piece? Is it through an acquisition? We've helped people, helped dentists or doctors with practice acquisitions in order to grow their practice. They may have, designs on wanting to have a certain customer base, and to grow that from the ground up may be challenging. And so to look at different opportunities, and we try to help with that.
So what here we have to, I can't believe how fast this is going, Rick. We have to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. But when we come back with our guest, Rick Darrow with Liberty Bank for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to find out from Rick whether he thinks Mr. Drysdale from the Beverly Hillbillies is hot or not. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Seattle Shrimp Tank.
Would you like to grow your business, increase revenues, and raise profits? Would more financing from your banker help you grow? Who is guiding your succession plan? Would you like more control over your business so you can sleep better at night? SME Business Wealth Builder works with business leaders and owners like you to help them grow their business and build their business wealth. For more information and to check out free resources, go to smewealthbuilder.com.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Phil Simchich, and our guest today is Rick Darrow, CEO of Liberty Bank. And for our next segment, Hot or Not.
So, Rick, we're going to find out what's hot or not from you. We're going to pepper you with questions regarding business, banking, life, whole bunch of things, maybe even some soccer. You never know. You're going to tell us whether it's hot or not and why. At the end, you win absolutely nothing. So, Rick, do you remember Mr. Drysdale from the Beverly Hillbillies?
I kind of do, but thank you for bringing that up.
You must not have been the TV junkie that I was back in the day. Well, Mr. Drysdale had all of Jed Clampett's, all of it. I mean, he had his millions of dollars, all of it in one bank. So hot or not, Rick, having all your personal and business accounts at one bank?
I would say that's hot in the sense that you probably don't want to do that. I think that even though I'm a community banker, I would say that, you want to have more than one banker that you're dealing with. You may have different needs as time goes on. I would love, and we would love to be the primary banker for many business owners. But I also know that as you grow, you need to tap into other resources, and we can be helpful in that process itself. But I would say that you do want to have a trusted banker that you can turn to. But as far as using other financial institutions, other financial resources, I would never say just focus in on one.
Rick, earlier we talked about the problems some people had just using technology to make applications for PPP. Is technology, financial technology, fintech, the future of business banking, hot or not?
I would say it's hot. You guys keep bringing up hot items. Financial technology is changing our industry dramatically. And the key thing is and we are looking at different ways that we partner with financial technology. I know I was on a call just 3 weeks ago with a financial technology sort of accelerator program where we interviewed through the community bankers of Washington, looking at, various companies that were presenting themselves to bankers to partner with. And I think it is the way to go. You've got artificial intelligence, you've got different data metrics that you can use, but I still believe that if you partner that with a human element, it can really empower you, and you can become a partner with financial technology. You can use those tools. You can scale a little bit, even though we're oriented more towards a referral network and probably a smaller, population of customers at this point. But it does give you the opportunity to scale and to provide better value as you move forward. Because artificial intelligence and the other metrics, you cannot avoid those. And there's so much creativity happening in that space. There really is. And so I'm excited about it. I think it changes community banking dramatically, but I think it can change it for the better.
So, Rick, speaking about technology, I know that I've seen some of these, and I've talked to bankers such as yourself, and especially community bankers that are starting to use. I don't know if it's the right word, but it's a teller kiosk. Basically, these kiosks where you're driving around somewhere, you stop to get a Starbucks coffee, and all of a sudden you can see a kiosk there where you can go in and make a deposit because you just picked up a check and send it into the bank, and the bank is 30 miles away, 50 miles away, 100 miles away. Hot or not, teller kiosks.
I would say they're not, but I mean that in the sense that I think technology is changing from the standpoint that it's, kiosk, ATMs. I know personally, I haven't been to an ATM for a long time, a long time. And,
Even the one
granted, I work
outside
in
your
a bank,
bank,
so I
right?
don't need to go to an ATM. But the fact of the matter is I think that technology, you're getting more into a cashless structure. You're having more tools at home where you can scan your check, at least from a consumer standpoint. Yes, there are needs to come into the office. We find a lot of times with businesses where they still have cash, and we use couriers even. So we're still using lower technology type of instruments to achieve things. But I think that we're moving more towards a little bit different environment in terms of financial technology, where you can transfer cash easily without having to go into a kiosk situation. Do I think they're good and they add value to existing banks today? Of course they do, but I just don't think that's a direction where we're headed.
So Rick, hot or not, I know you're new in your role. I believe you started in December. So Q1 is under your belt, and that's your quarter. Because when I look at Q1 2020 results off your financial statements, very small net income. And then Q1 of 2021, your first quarter, phenomenal net income, almost 70 times improvement in performance. Are you that hot?
Well, number one, I've been here for a long time, actually, Phil. So when you're talking about the first quarter, it's probably the first quarter under Liberty, the Bancorp, the bank holding company. So I have been here for a while, and it is, all of that's hot. I mean, anything having to do with our bank is hot right now. So, when you're talking about the improvement that we have there, we have been expanding. The bank has been based, we've had one full service office in Paulsbo in Kitsap County. We have the largest depository office in Paulsbo of any regional or community bank in that market. But what we've done is we've started to expand into Bellevue. We have a loan production office as well as operational folks in Bellevue, Washington, which is basically an innovative hub of technology expansion and work. And so for us, that's a big move. We've invested a lot of operational dollars, so we haven't leveraged our operation yet in that area. And so I see, earnings are probably compromised for us in the next year. And that's by design, so that we can expand into that market. We believe that market will add value to us, make us a better organization, because we're challenged with delivering products and services in a wider market. And so I'm excited about it. I appreciate the observation on the first quarter. Thank you very much. We continue to make progress, but the progress I'm looking for right now is is growth in those markets, whether it be deposits and loans. And I see the fruit that comes forth from that is the earnings. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the important distinctions you made there is you're investing for longer term growth, and your shareholders understand that, compared to some of the huge publicly traded banks that often chase quarterly earnings, or worse, to boost profits and things like that. So I think the value of a niche bank to business owners can't be understated, because there's a really good fit, because both your interests are aligned. You're not chasing short-term quarterly earnings. You're both building businesses that'll be more valuable and more sustainable going forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. And in fact, you're absolutely right. And that's where I feel very fortunate to have, shareholders, our governance in terms of our board that supports a longer term vision, not just short-term outlook.
So Rick, if we get out of short-term outlook and into long-term outlook, and not necessarily from a financial standpoint, what, as CEO and a longtime banker, what did you learn from the pandemic? What do you walk away now, a year and a half after, saying, I learned something that we can, as a bank, move forward with? What did you take away from the last year and a half?
Oh my gosh, there are so many pieces to that, Dan. I would say that first and foremost, and you've probably heard it from others, is that we do have the ability to work remotely effectively. And we can do that. And what's interesting for us is that we've been able to add talent. The most important part of a bank is its people. It's a service-oriented organization. Our largest cost is people. And so having exceptional people is important. We've attracted some new talent to the bank over the last couple of years. And the fact that they could work remotely and be effective in that remote work has been just phenomenal for us. And that came true even in the PPP loans. You had bankers processing the PPP loans from their kitchen at home. I mean, they were busy working all hours to make that work. That became something that was observable for us, that we hadn't really thought about. We had talked about working remotely, but in this case, it pushed us into it more so. And I know that did that for many businesses that are office oriented. And so for us, it was fantastic. On the other hand, on the flip side of it it was challenging to keep our culture. Everybody was working in silos from their home office, or even those that were in the office. What I saw is on the front lines, because we did have to provide services to people that needed those services, and usually through a drive-up experience, at least at our branch. And so, the culture was harder to keep together. It was more challenging. Sharing on those Monday morning meetings was really integral. I felt really separated at times with the team, and our team has stayed together, but it's been very, very challenging during that time. And so I think we need to, I'm excited about being able to come back to the office, about being able to spend time face to face. We've actually just within the last few weeks celebrated the fact that we could walk into each other's office and have conversations. And there's so much that you can get out of that and can be much more effective in certain areas. So there's pros and cons to it. But we did learn that technology can serve us well going forward.
So Rick, I want to follow up on that, because you mentioned about the importance of culture and feeling isolated. And there's some companies that are going to retain that work from home model or hybrids. So as a leader in your leadership team, what did you do or do differently to really strengthen that culture and retain that engagement in those relationships with the employees working from home?
Well, we had a lot of Zoom meetings. That helped, although I am very tired of Zoom. But I will say that helped because we had to meet in some form or fashion. And so these folks that did work from home, we corresponded with each other. So it created an impression of, meeting together in smaller groups. You could have more meetings, and we probably did have more meetings because the convenience between the two offices that would have been problematic before were made possible. So I think we had that ability to communicate in person, visually, and present items through Zoom, those kind of things, or Teams. We've used both. Have been very helpful.
Well, what's going to be helpful now is to take that second short break to hear from our sponsors. Got to pay the bills, Phil. And when we come back with more from our guest, Rick Darrow from Liberty Bank, for our Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're gonna make Rick answer about his hobbies. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, Kitsap Sun Newspaper. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Phil Simchich, and our guest today is Rick Darrow with Liberty Bank. And for our next segment, Plead the Fifth.
Rick, we're going to turn up the heat. I've known you for a while, and so I hope we don't run out of too much time, because I got lots of questions for you, pal. You get to plead the fifth once on one of these questions. If you plead the fifth early, we're going to really throw them at you. And again, at the end, you win absolutely nothing. So we've been asking this question for this year, and I want to hear from you. Rick, you have to start a new business. I'm not going to let you stay banker all the rest of your life. You're starting a new business, and you got to start a new business based on a hobby. What's the hobby you're going to start your new business with?
Oh, I would get into doing electronic music and publish it.
No
I would
kidding.
love that. Yeah. So
well,
I would,
I know this is terrible radio. Yeah, I was gonna say this is terrible radio, but you have a system there. I see a keyboard, and yes, I see a whole bunch of other cool things.
So yeah, I would dive into that. Now I'm not doing it now. I'm too busy being a banker, Dan. But I would, if that were another hobby or something that I wanted to do, I love creating sound and listening to new and different types of composition.
I learned something new about you.
So Rick, when we're working with family-owned businesses, and husband and wives often are both in the business, so they're sharing everything and kind of having problems to switch off. But when it comes to personal finance, should they have separate bank accounts?
Wow. Of course they should. Yeah, they should have separate bank accounts.
So that gives them their financial independence and more control and a lot more tax efficiency and clarity for what they're doing with their money. Okay.
So the tsunami is out there. Everybody's you're gonna see separate bank accounts coming out there, and I think that's a great answer. By the way, you touched on this. So my next plead the fifth, you touched on this or a little bit earlier. So plead the fifth, Rick, is walk-in retail banking dead?
Is walk-in retail?
Walk-in where people you need to even have tellers is the whole concept of a walk-in, walk up to the teller, stand in line. Is that whole concept dead or dying?
Well, it's being reduced. There's no doubt about it, Dan, but I don't think it's dead. And, they've talked for a long time about branches going away. I remember when internet banking came out, early on, it was like, oh, the branches are dead. We're going to have virtual branches. You won't need to go in and talk to people. I think there is oftentimes the people that come in and do a transaction, they have a question. We're very oriented, for instance, towards customer service. So customer service, it's all about when they walk in, they get customer service. It's not trying to sell per se, but if they have a need or they identify something, they can point them over to one of our, a mortgage officer that can guide them, or they can point them in another direction. That piece of, at least in our bank, is not going to go away. They become a center post. They're almost a referral person or partner up front, taking care of the client, and then finding and understanding their needs a little bit more, especially if they haven't tapped into using one of our loan officers or relationship managers in general as a trusted advisor. So the idea is always to kind of help them, point them in a direction. And I think that, paying and receiving will still be there. It'll be automated in a variety of ways, but the touch point of having a person in there can be, I think, is still very valuable.
So Rick, you mentioned before we actually started recording that you've held positions of chief financial officer. And so in your role as CFO, what was probably the most powerful lesson you learned that would benefit other business owners, regardless of the size of the business or the stage of the business, to learn and understand, to really grow their business and build their wealth?
Well, being a CFO of a bank is and a small community bank like we are a small business. There is no doubt about that. That's where we can relate to, and in my past history, as you just mentioned, Phil, very much a small business. So in terms of the advice, or what I would say there is, what I always did in terms of the balance sheet was we were always planning on anything that could change. We structured the balance sheet so that it performed well in the current environment. And that means investments, how you manage the investment portfolio, how you balance it out with your loan portfolio. In addition to that, how you fund it through deposits and other types of funding. Sometimes you can get better pricing for your depositors because you're using borrowed funds for other types of funding to effectively manage your balance sheet. So the idea would be, can you manage your business so that it can weather different types of environments? It could be a storm, but it could be a boon, a period of largesse in which you can grow rapidly. And if you're growing rapidly, do you have enough capital to effectively do that? What kind of things do you need to do that? So the balance sheet and the structure of it and the earnings that roll off of it, or revenues that roll off of it, are really important. And so I kind of saw the balance sheet as like a big video game, and you learn how to work the pieces well. And as a business owner, I know oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, small business owners, if you're a painter, oh my gosh, you're the best that you can be at painting, but you need that advice, you need that guidance, and a good CFO can really help you do that.
Hey, Rick,
So, and I saw that you,
go ahead, Phil, I'm sorry.
sorry, Dan. And I saw that you're practicing what you preach, and you recently took out a sub-debt loan, really to strengthen your own balance sheet. And also that's a huge step for any business to grow, because it's very patient debt, which is always much cheaper than equity, much cheaper.
That's correct.
Sorry, Dan.
No, that's okay. Phil has the deep stuff. I'm about to talk about toasters. Listen, you remember back in the day, Rick, when banks would offer to give you like a toaster or some sort of gift to come in and give us your money, open an account with us. You talked about relationship banking and referrals. You're not giving away toasters anymore, but you're obviously bringing in new accounts. What makes Liberty Bank different, even from all the other community banks? And it's not necessarily a negative against the other banks. I'm not looking for that. But what makes you and your bank different from all the other banks out there?
Well, I think we have a lot of similarities, but when you look at the differences, you're right. And you reminded me of another banker I knew that was giving away toasters probably about 5 years ago. And I'm sorry to divert here, but he would have his logo emblazoned on the toast that went into the toaster. So
that's
I
pretty
thought that
cool.
was kind of a cool idea. But to answer, so we could have our logo. We could give away toasters and have a logo on their toast every morning. But to get back to your question, the differentiator for us, first and foremost, we need to add value. And so when we add value, that value is added. And a differentiator for us in our market right now is, if you deposit with us, you're going to end up with more money. You will, because of the rates we pay and the service fees we charge. And in addition to that, you're going to have much more handheld service. And that handheld service concierge kind of service that you're going to get, it empowers you as a business owner because not only do you have the human element working on it, but we're still using technology to effectively move that needle. But I see that those kind of things are important. We are competitive in terms of pricing. And generally speaking, a community bank like ourselves in particular, and at our size, is going to offer a different model that can provide more value to its business, small business depositors than any large regional, because the regionals are operating just on a totally different model. They're charging higher service fees. They're paying less in terms of deposit yields. And even with this low deposit yield environment, if you look at it over the long term, we end up providing more value. And I'm talking about just dollars to the small businesses that are out there. And in particular, for instance, we've really offered a lot to the nonprofit businesses. We've had a sector of our bank and products and services that we've offered to nonprofits since I arrived back in 2011. And you can see it out there. It's under the moniker of community checking. And it's usually been at a rate that's much higher normally than the market is. So, those are some differentiators, but I would also say another differentiator, Dan, and I know we may be using up a lot of time here, is the fact that you do have within the smaller community bank framework. In Paulsville, for instance, we have at least 3 loan officers working out of that office. If you go to Bellevue, we have at least 2, and we're planning on hiring more. You won't find that in the regionals. You'll probably have to deal with, if you're a small business owner, medium-sized business owner, you're probably dealing with a loan officer that's somewhere out of Seattle, or maybe, somewhere far away that you're having to deal with, that will provide you with that advice. There's nothing wrong with that in the sense, but they're not plugged into the community. You can't look at them generally face to face, on a regular basis. You can't just drop in. We have clients that just drop in and see our loan officers, and they'll talk to them for a while. And sometimes I wonder if they're even talking about business. I think they seem to be having so much fun in those conversations as I look into the offices. But the fact is that kind of relationship, stands tall in terms of what we're doing.
So Rick, just one question, because you're talking about advisory and relationships. So what would be the top 2 or 3 ways that a small, medium enterprise business could, what can they do to strengthen their balance sheet?
Well, for a business, I would say in terms of strengthening your balance sheet, obviously that depends on a variety of factors. Each business is unique. But I would say first and foremost, and I know this is very general, is talk to your banker, find a good CPA, have these folks that are trusted advisors help you in terms of managing and understanding how your business model operates and getting a feel for what is it really about. Again, you may have a discipline and knowledge of what you do, and you do it really well. But in terms of, the 3 things that you can do, it's more about the individual people that you turn to guide you. Because you're not going to know it all, and you need to be focused in on what you do well.
Phil, you're muted, Phil. I think.
Yeah, I got a lawnmower going by, or something crazy is happening at the beach. So people doing yard work during business hours, how annoying. Anyways, so Rick, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank. For our listeners that want to get in touch with you or learn more about Liberty Bank, how can they get more information?
Well, they can reach me directly at, our Darrow, at libertybanknorthwest.com. So it's libertybanknw.com.
Awesome. Great. So make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcast from, iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify. Please follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Hey, Rick, thank you for being on. I want to extend my thanks as well. You got off the hook. I was going to ask you who your favorite person from Oak Harbor is. I know what your answer would have definitely been, but we'll have to do that at another time. But thanks for joining us. Phil, as always, thanks for taking the co-host seat somewhere in the Regina, Saskatchewan area. Our next show, and everybody listen, this is important. We had a schedule change due to a conflict. Is going to be not on Wednesday, but on Friday, June 25th. Friday, June 25th at 12 p.m. Pacific on our Facebook page. So sorry for the change, but sometimes things happen. So Friday, June 25th, our guest is going to be Annie Cheng. She is the founder and CEO of The Table Less Traveled. I can't wait. We're going to be talking about food. My co-host next week will be Michelle Baumberger. Listen, in the meantime, until we see you next Friday, be safe, be well. I think Rick would agree and Phil would agree, be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.